The scream tore through the saloon like a blade through canvas, sharp enough to silence the clink of glasses and the low murmur of gamblers mid-hand, and every man in the room felt it strike somewhere deep in his chest before his mind caught up. It wasn't just pain in that cry, it was betrayal, terror, and a desperate plea for someone, anyone, to see her as human. She was bound to the wheel at the center of the room, arms stretched, wrists raw from rope, her dark hair hanging in damp strands against her face, and when she cried out, it hurt so much. Right there. Even the hard-eyed drifters, who'd seen hangings and gunfights, shifted uneasily on their stools. This wasn't the usual cruelty of the frontier. This was deliberate, slow, and meant to be watched. The rancher crouched near the edge of the circle, hat low, jaw clenched so tight it ached. He hadn't planned to be here tonight. He'd come to town for supplies, maybe a quiet drink, and instead found himself staring at something that made his stomach turn. He recognized her now, Eliza Moreno, the woman who ran the small boarding house near the river, the one who fed travelers without asking questions and patched up riders when bullets grazed too close. She'd helped one of his ranch hands months ago, never asking for payment. And now here she was, turned into a spectacle, for men who laughed too loudly to hide their fear of feeling anything at all. The man running this show, a smooth-talking gambler with a smile, like a knife circled her slowly, tapping the wheel with his cane as if testing a horse for soundness. He accused her of stealing, of hiding money for outlaws. Accusations thrown around loosely in towns like this when someone needed a villain. Eliza denied it through clenched teeth, but denial didn't matter. The wheel creaked as it turned a fraction, tightening the ropes, and her cry came again, louder, breaking. The rancher's hands twitched. He told himself to stay still. In the West, a man learned early when to mind his own business. Intervene at the wrong time, and you ended up dead in an alley with no one remembering your name. But something about the way she looked straight ahead, refusing to beg, refusing to collapse into tears, struck him harder than any plea could have. He remembered his sister years ago, taken by sickness on the trail west. How powerless he'd felt then. How that same helplessness now tried to root him to the floor. Around him, men watched with crossed arms. Some entertained, some uncomfortable, most relieved it wasn't them. The gambler demanded she confess, demanded she say where the money was hidden, and when she said she didn't know what he was talking about, he nodded to the men at the wheel. Another twist. Another scream. That's enough, the rancher muttered under his breath, though no one heard him yet. His mind raced, calculating distances, counting men, weighing odds. He was outnumbered and everyone knew it. But he also knew something else. Most of these men were cowards when faced with real resistance. They hid behind numbers and cruelty because alone they were small. The gambler caught sight of the rancher then, eyes narrowing slightly, recognizing the look of a man on the edge of a decision. You got something to say, friend? He called out, voice honeyed but dangerous. The room waited. The rancher stood slowly, the scrape of his boots on the wooden floor loud in the sudden hush. He didn't reach for his gun, not yet.
Let her down, he said simply.
Laughter rippled through the room, nervous and mocking. Or what? The gambler asked. The rancher met his gaze, and in that moment the years of dust, loss, and quiet endurance behind his eyes spoke louder than threats. Or this town will remember tonight for the wrong reasons, he replied. The gambler smiled wider, signaling the wheel to turn again. Eliza cried out once more, and something inside the rancher snapped clean in two. He moved, not with rage, but with terrifying calm, and in that instant, everything was about to change. If this story already has you holding your breath, remember to subscribe to the channel, because the West is full of moments like this, where one choice redraws the line between cruelty and courage, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The rancher's hand finally closed around the grip of his revolver, not in a flourish, not in a challenge, but with the steady certainty of a man who had made peace with consequences, and the room seemed to inhale all at once as if the walls, themselves new blood, might soon soak into the floorboards. He didn't draw immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the wheel, close enough to see the tears streaking through dust on Eliza's face, close enough for her to meet his eyes. And in that brief connection, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, fear, and a fragile thread of hope. I said let her down, he repeated, voice low, carrying more weight now. The gambler's smile faltered just slightly, because he could feel the shift in the room. Men who'd been spectators were now participants, whether they liked it or not. Power, after all, was a delicate thing in the West, and it could turn faster than a wheel. "You're making a mistake," the gambler warned, nodding toward his hired muscle. The rancher finally drew, the click of the hammer loud as a gunshot in the silence. "No," he said, "I've been making them my whole life by staying quiet." The first shot didn't kill anyone. It shattered the iron bracket holding the wheel in place. Wood groaned, ropes slackened just enough for Eliza to sag, and the room erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped, men shouted, guns cleared holsters. But the rancher moved with a purpose that came from years of working. Land that didn't care if you lived or died. He fired again, this time into the ceiling, showering splinters and commanding attention. "Anyone who wants to die over a lie, keep standing," he shouted. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one man stepped back. Then another. Courage drained from the room like whiskey from a cracked barrel. The gambler cursed, reaching for his own gun. But Eliza, half-freed and shaking, swung her leg hard, striking him in the face with a crack that echoed louder than any shot. He fell stunned, and before he could recover, the rancher kicked the gun away. Silence followed, heavy and stunned. The rancher cut the ropes, hands surprisingly gentle as he lowered Eliza to the floor. She collapsed against him, pain still racking her body, but alive, and that was everything. "It still hurts," she whispered, voice raw. "I know," he replied, steadying her. "But it won't forever." Outside, the night wind carried the distant howl of a coyote, as if the land itself acknowledged what had just happened. The sheriff arrived late, as sheriffs often did, and after hearing enough overlapping stories to make his head spin, he took the gambler away in irons, more to restore order than to deliver justice, but sometimes order was the first step. As the saloon emptied, men avoiding the rancher's eyes, Eliza was helped to a chair, water pressed into her hands. She looked up at him, then really looked, and said, "You didn't have to do that." He shook his head slowly. "That's where you're wrong," he answered. "I did." Word of the incident spread faster than prairie fire, and by morning the town felt different, not kinder, not suddenly just, but aware. A line had been crossed, and someone had crossed back. The rancher returned to his land, but he wasn't the same man who'd ridden into town for supplies. He'd acted, and in doing so, reminded others that silence was a choice, and not always the right one. Eliza healed slowly, pain lingering like an echo, but she lived, and the boarding house reopened, its door a little stronger for having once been broken. And somewhere deep in the dust and danger of the West, a story took root, the kind that travels, farther than bullets and lasts, longer than fear. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even in the harshest places humanity can still rise, make sure you subscribe to the channel. More powerful West stories are coming, stories of courage, pain, and redemption, and by subscribing you become part of keeping these voices alive, one story at a time.